Hi, Ujwal. So I spoke to Ujwal for the first time last evening, and he was just getting into a cab. And when we spoke, it felt like his entire distance to wherever he was going, I was sitting right next to him, and we were having this whatever chat in the cab there. So it was a very warm conversation, and I hope the vibe continues because I really like that vibe. You know, it recharges you. It's very positive. So. So let's get to what. So how to start a startup series? That was the series that you kind of headed and led and envisioned at IMA. Would you like to share a little about the series to our audience?
Basically, this is 2016. That's when the three, four of us were setting our own. And this is after the first year. You're thinking of. So, the way it happens during engineering program is first year is rigorous, as insane as you can think of. In fact, after the first year, all of us get t-shirts. It's called Everyone Survivors because you survived that 1 year. And second year is entirely opposite. It's chill packs. Okay, so hello, I'm out. Oh, okay. So second year is chill max, wherein you're just trying to live your life. And for the three of us, it was that we wanted to set up our own startup. So there were a lot of gyan available online on how to set your startup, on how you should think of idea and so on. But so this was one part, and then there were a lot of stories of entrepreneurs on what they did, right? But those were inspirational stories. There was no tangible connect between the two. What we thought of is that can there be something which people in the entrepreneurial space, particularly in India, can come and talk about how they did what they did. And that's where the journey of how to start a startup began. Honestly, we directly copy pasted from Stanford because over there the same series was there. But the thesis was different. The thesis was that we will talk about the 10 steps of a startup journey. And then these iconic entrepreneurs will come about and talk about their journey. So, for instance, Girish, of the founder of Freshwork, he came in and talked about how he started Freshworks. Right? Sachin Bansal of Flipkart came and talked about how he hired people and so on.
Okay. So there's this interesting thing that I heard that it was your dad who actually motivated you to put all of this on paper, put it into, just bring all your thoughts on paper so that it also inspires you and inspires a lot of other people. So how did that come about? I mean, how dad was interested in writing, or was he interested in business, the
So,
business side of things?
what happened is that my dad has always been interested in publishing something. And what happened is that, so in the 1 year in 2017, when we did HCSAS, How to Start a Startup, we put that on YouTube. The stories, the lessons were really not just inspiring, but really, really good tangible learnings. So we put that on YouTube and I just forgot about it. And in January 2018, so my dad was asking what happened about the series which you did in your second year because you put in a lot of efforts in that. And I thought, okay, let me just check it out. And there were over 3 million views on YouTube.
And you just forgot about it, and then you
I
saw 3
didn't
million
know.
views. Wow. Okay.
And so in some sense, there was what we call product market fit. So it's a jargon. it's
We
badly
we cover
abused
we
jargon.
covered that jargon in the session earlier. You were not in the hall, but I think a lot of others will kind of connect with it. Yeah, please go on.
So at that point, he said that look, the stories are already there, the insights are already there. Why not write a book? Because it might have even a larger coverage. And it'll be simple, right? You just have to write down what those people have said, publish it, and get done with. I didn't know it'll take 4.5 years to get here, but yeah, that's the time it took.
And you co-authored the book, right, with Shobit. And so, how did you, decide that it's going to be him? What was it? The vibe? Sometimes you choose who you're going to be, because it's like putting a lot of thought, effort, time, whatever. So how did you guys come together? Was your
So
classmate or?
No.
Yeah.
So what happened is that in January 2018, I started writing the book. So this is after graduation, just 6 months into the first job post MBA. This was I was working in BCG, Boston Consulting Group,
Right.
and the life in BCG, particularly in the first year, is not that great. Right, you're pulled in all the directions and so on. So while I started writing the book, but probably in 10, 20 days, all I could write is one page. And at that point, I thought, कि अकेले तो ना हो पाएगा.
Okay.
And I need someone else to write along with me. A better person would be who's been associated with me in building this series, and someone ideally who is still in the second year. Because as I mentioned earlier, second year is when you have time. So talked with Shobhit. Shobhit was in fact one of the first persons I talked with because honestly I'm not really good at writing. I've never written anything earlier apart from few Quora posts. That's it.
No love letters also.
Okay, I won't count that. But so I write poem in Urdu,
Wow. Okay.
but nothing much in formal English. Shobit writes well, and he writes really, really well. So I talked to him. I told if you're interested. He said, "Yeah, sure. Let's write." And he came on board around March. Interestingly, that's the time second year gets over, and he also got into BCG.
Okay, so both of you were at BCG
Yeah.
when this was written. Okay, okay. And is it true that about 5 odd chapters were written by you when you were in hospital or something?
Yeah. So I nothing was moving like because I was in BCG, he was in BCG. Both of us were stuck in our own respective works. So while you're working for the first 5 days, Monday to Friday, but of course in the first 1.5 years, weekends also get involved. Then what happened is that around so timelines, right? Started writing in January, nothing moved. Shobit came on board by March, nothing still moved. Now in around September, almost 9 months, all I had written was 10, 15 pages. And then I got hospitalized because of typhoid. And I was there in hospital for almost a month. And during that time, I wrote 5 chapters. Half of the book was done
Okay,
in that one single month.
nice. Okay, so a silver lining to the
Yeah.
typhoid. Okay. Um, One very interesting facet about the book is that an inspiration to everyone here is Narayan Murthy Saab has written the forward, for your book. How did you manage to convince such a busy man, a passionate entrepreneur who's traveling across the world to spend and that kind of time writing, and it's a pretty long, lengthy forward. I read it, very very passionately written also. How did you manage to convince him to write this?
So it's also a very interesting story. So what happened is that we wanted someone of the gravitas of Mr. Murthy to write a forward to have a really punchy beginning. So as part of the book, I mean, how to start a startup happened at IIM Ahmedabad. IIM Ahmedabad is also now a stakeholder as well as a shareholder in the book. And I'm a big Potter fan. So IIM Ahmedabad is like Hogwarts. It's whenever you ask for help, help will be provided. So what happened is that I talked to IMA folks that I want, and the three people in my list was the first one was Mr. Murthy, second one was Mr. Ratan Tata, and third one was Mr. Anand Mahindra, and in that priority order. And I told K if it's possible, if it can be done. Interestingly, Mr. Murthy was also chairman of IMA earlier. In fact, he started his career from IMA and got connected to Mr. Murthy through IMA. He asked he asked firstly, send me the book, I'll read the book. If I find interesting, then only I'll put my name to it. Then he asked certain other questions. Why did you write the book? What inspired you? And so on. Interestingly, now what happened is that this is February 2021, and the book had to go into printing by March 2021. And our publisher, HarperCollins, they said that look, you only have 2 weeks to get the forward in place, and that's it. And I said that, look, Mr. Murthy is finally convinced, right? And he wants to come on board. Now I can't push him to get this thing done in 2 weeks. And he's traveling and so on. And he said that it'll take him at least 1.5 months. Then the publisher said, कि देख लो अगर हो सकता है, because then we might need to drop. So then I wrote to Mr. Murthy sir that 2 हफ्ते ही हैं, if it can be done. And within 2 weeks, he sent 7th version of the foreword, the final version. The difference between 6th and the 7th version was just actually one spelling mistake, which he said that it's my old age and therefore I couldn't look at it. So within 2 weeks, 7 versions and the final version came out.
Wow, really wow. Such a perfectionist, no?
Yeah.
Role model for all of us. Tell me a little about the book. You say you call it the startup compass, so it's obvious that you're trying to lay out a little bit of it's a directional kind of book. But I have also read in some of your previous interviews where you're saying that you wanted to write something which doesn't get too preachy, because a lot of books in this ecosystem are preachy. They will give you those 10 things to do and 10 things not to do. How is your book, you think, why this title that came about, and can you share a little about that?
So every entrepreneur's journey is a unique journey. For instance, a new Facebook cannot be built today, right? And the book, any learning can also never be preachy, because the same mistakes cannot be repeated again, and the same learnings cannot also be repeated again, right? So therefore, it has to be a framework on how you think of it, because every problem needs to be solved uniquely. So the way the book is structured is that it's a compass, right? And that's why the name Startup Compass, because you will have your own journey. It just gives a direction of what that journey could be, and that's where the name of the book comes to be. And the way the book is structured is that it's a 10-step journey, right? Which is how to even think before starting up, how to think of an idea, how to form a team, build a product, raise money, launch, probably even pivot, scale it up, take it to IPO, and so on, right? And within each stage, there are frameworks on how you think of it. And within each framework, there is the story of an individual entrepreneur on how they did what they did to make it real for you as well as inspiring. But as I said, it's a framework. There is not definitive set of 10 things which you follow and you'll be able to build a $1 billion company. That can never be the case.
आपने इस किताब में 15 entrepreneurs को feature किया है. What was the reason? I mean, the entrepreneur ecosystem is large. There are a lot of success stories. Why these 15 only? Is it because they come from different verticals, different businesses, or is it because that you looked up to these 15 more than anybody else? What was the thought behind these 15?
So the thought behind was multiple. First thing is that, of course, covering different, not just verticals, which is the industries, because different industries will have different knowledge, right? But also different stages of the companies. So for instance, we have Sachin Bansal, who sold his startup to Tarun Mehta back in 2017. Aether Energy was still, they didn't even launch their first product. So we wanted different companies in different at different scales. Of course, we wanted people who are famous, so that as readers or the people who came to watch them can also feel associated and also feel inspired. But yeah, more importantly, it's the people whom I could connect with so that I could get hold of them and get them to IMN.
And also to the world, because when you put this on paper, it's a whole lot of this. It's 15 stories that perhaps so there are a lot of things about these, these gentlemen, these women, like you talked of Anu, that is not very well known in some of the other books or not available online. So what are some of the things that stayed with you? Because he's so modest. He, in fact, in our conversation yesterday, said that as an entrepreneur, even I have failed. There's also a failure bit to entrepreneurship. And while I'm a serial entrepreneur, I've also, some of my ventures have failed. So what were some of the learnings while you interacted with these 15 individuals?
So on that, actually, let me give a quick introduction about what I'm doing, and then I'll come to some of the most interesting stories and most insightful conversations I've been in. So this is actually my third startup which I'm running right now. The first two um, did not succeed. The first one did not even get out of campus. Second one I ran for 1 year, and then my co-founder took over, and then because of COVID, things didn't flourish. And there's a third startup which I'm running right now, Nakad. Um, it's actually it's been we've been on the ground for almost a couple of years, been full time on this for almost 1 year now. We raised our seed round of $7 million. That's one of the largest seed rounds in India, from Axel and Matrix, and 50 angel investors. So the thing is that हार के ही जीत हासिल होती है. I remember this. So there's a professor at IMA, Professor Handa. He is also a serial entrepreneur, and he said one thing that, look, you all come from very good background, and you're at a good institute, right? Now, if you think of it, just think, leave everything aside and just think monetarily if you have to. Even if you fail the first time, even if you fail the second time, even if you fail the third time, fourth time, fifth time, just be there till the seventh time or the eighth time or the ninth time, because there is no chance that there is no light at the end of the tunnel. Of course, you'll have to be flexible. You'll have to think of what the market is saying, right? And not just build things on your own and just pray to God that things will work out. That won't be the case. But you'll have to be just at it. And that's where the most inspiring story for me has come. And it's part of the book. So the founder of Make My Trip, Ujwal Kalra, it's his story. This is early 2000s. So Deep was working. So there were three people, Deep and the other two co-founders. They were working out of a small tin can, not bigger than even this area in Okhla, and they were selling tickets to people in US, right? And this is just post the bubble. The internet bubble had burst, so there was no money from the investors. The business wasn't taking off, and every day they were contemplating whether they should continue or not. One day they made a pact that we will not discuss every day whether we should continue, but on the last day of the month, whether it's 30, 31st, 28, 29, whatever, on that day, on the evening, they will discuss amongst themselves whether they should continue for the next 1 month or not. So all of a sudden, instead of 365 decisions in a year to continue or not, that boiled down to 12 decisions. And eventually what ended up happening every month is that on the last day of the month, they would go to Keur's home. So among the three people, Keur was the only bachelor. And they would end up drinking the entire bottle of Old Monk. And they won't even discuss whether they should continue the next month. And fir raat ki baat ki, the next day they would wake up and then they have to continue for the next 1 month. So all of a sudden, 365 decisions to 12 decisions to 0 decisions. So sometimes indifference is a bliss, and you just have to be at it.
I don't know whether I am allowed to ask you this, but why do you think your startups failed? Was it because maybe at that point in time you had not heard of stories like this, and so or was it the idea, the product marketing fit, what that you're talking about, the product market fit? So because you come from very illustrious educational background and from these institutions, and you have an entire alum there. So when you say that you fail, and failure could mean different things to different people, right? One is why. Two is, do you think that India today, has also learned to celebrate failures? Like, okay, while you had superb guidance from your teacher who told you that, ignore all of this, just keep at it. But today, I think, do you think that the entire startup ecosystem also encourages a failed startup entrepreneur to say, hang on, we are there, we also have some similar stories. So what do you think it has changed a little bit?
So on the first part, not all tales are fairy tales, right? And the most important part is why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
So in fact, Abhiraj Bahl, who's the founder of Urban Company, his first startup also failed. His first startup was actually on, so he wanted to build something which creates value, but he ended up building something in an entertainment sector. There's nothing right or wrong. The question is why you're doing what you're doing, right? And the same for me. My first two startups, the reason I did that was because I wanted to start it up. There was no inherent reason for why. There has to be, because in a startup journey, there are ups and downs, and there are moments when shit will hit the roof. And you really need to clutch your hands and just keep at it. And it won't be possible unless there's a very strong why you're doing this, right? And of course, as I mentioned, that there has to be flexibility. You have to listen to the market. For instance, even in my current startup, we started with certain thesis, and now we pivoted, right? The why is still strong. The why will still remain, but we are listening to the, and hopefully we will continue listening to the market, because market teaches you. And it's not the case that you will go to the market and say that boss aise hi work karega. That doesn't happen. And on the second part, yes, things have changed a lot, particularly in the last 5 to 7 years. I remember back in 2011, 12, during my undergrad days, no one, I mean, there were very few startups, not even a single unicorn back then, right? And in fact, very interestingly, I was talking to Sanjeev Dikchandani, who's the, in some sense, godfather of the internet economy in India. He started even much earlier, in early 90s. What he said is that, in fact, during his tenure, he was at Reckitt RB, Reckitt whatever, RB.
Guys, yeah.
Yeah. And one of his peers had left the company, started up, that didn't work out. And when he came back, he would never get promotion. And he said that if you go into the startup world, it was, if that doesn't work, basically your career has ended. Now think from that to think of today. I'm openly talking about what I'm not being able to achieve, but I know what I'll be able to achieve as well. Right? The thing is that failures, I wouldn't even call it celebration. It's a moment, or it's phases of moments when you learn. And my dada used to say this, गिरते हैं शहसवार ही मैदान जंग में, वो तिफल क्या गिरेगा जो घुटनों के बल चले.
Wow. Really wow. Yeah. Very nice. Of all these 15 people that you've spoken to and highlighted in your book, is there like one common denominator that is like a common connect between all of them? Do you think there is?
So interestingly, that's been a question that has been asked to me a lot of times,
Yeah.
because everyone has had their different journey, and now everyone has made their big, of course, through their own ups and downs. Interestingly, there is nothing common or unique among all of them.
Okay.
The thing is that each one of them, if I were to pick up one thing, that will be that each one of them has been exceptional in at least one thing. Like you have to really hit it out of the park in at least one thing. For instance, I talked about Deep Kalra. I haven't seen a person who has had more persistence in his or her life. For instance, Mr. Narayan Murthy, his level of perfectionism I have never seen in anyone. For instance, Kunal Shah, the founder of Cred, earlier Free Charge, I haven't seen a better network person ever. Like literally, he would know anyone and everyone, and that too on his phone number. Right? For instance, Yashish Sayya, who is the founder of Policy Bazaar, he said that, I mean, when an email comes to him for hiring, he makes the decision just by looking at that email itself. His level of read of people, insane.
Very nice. So we did this here before in a previous session. So Again, I'll be honest, I don't have any fancy Karan Johar style gift hamper for you, but we'd like to do a quick rapid fire because we have very little time now, but it'll be fun to understand this from you. A few questions. So since you are an author now, what's that one book that you keep going back to for inspiration?
So it's Steve Jobs.
Steve
I
Jobs.
read that book every year.
Mhm.
It's not the case I don't remember. I remember every word on every page, but it's just that it's so inspiring that I read it every year.
Nice. One essential difference between Silicon Valley and the startup capital of India. What do you think is one
So
good or bad?
earlier I would have said that in some sense, even in India today, we would call, let's say, Square of the US, right? We would always try to copy what's happening in the US versus over here. Now the thing is changing a lot, and that's actually still. I mean, I would still say that we're behind Valley, but I'm sure in the next 10 to 15 years we will be the startup capital of the world.
Okay. One term, one jargon, one word that is used quite a lot in the startup ecosystem, but perhaps not understood very well. What do you think it is?
Product market fit.
Okay, we've heard that before. What is, who according to you, or who is your favorite young entrepreneur? You're one, a youngster yourself, but who in your, the peer group is one of your favorites?
I mean, in the same age group, in fact, Ritesh Agarwal, the founder of Oyo, he's even younger to me. Interestingly, I had interviewed him back in 2011 when he was setting up Uravel. This is even before he set up Oyo.
Right.
But his journey has been really inspirational.
Nice. So if you were, say, because Shark Tank is quite popular today, right? If you were on say the next episode of Shark Tank, what's one business or a industry or a vertical that you would passionately want to support as an investor?
Um, Actually, two. One would be clean tech because the earth is obviously not in a good shape. And monetarily, there are not many incentives out there to make really big thing, which is really a need of the hour in this world. That's one thing. Second thing would be financial inclusion.
Very nice. Very, very nice. How many books do you manage to read a year? Can we have that? Are you like a voracious reader?
Yeah, so mostly I read non-fiction.
Uh-huh.
Typically 10 to 11 a year.
Wow.
Not that much, but
Okay. Okay. Great. My last question would be slightly personal. So since we started with your journey, what was that reaction? आपके पापा ने जब आपने उनको बुक थमाई और बोला कि you motivated me, you inspired me, and I've done this. What was his reaction to your work of passion?
so it took 4.5 years, much longer than what I would have anticipated. Like we had to rewrite the book multiple times to make sure that the product is really good. At least that is something which we would like to read. When first time the book came, I opened it up and gave it to my father. I could see an eardrop that didn't fall, but that was still there. And the only thing which he said that I'm proud of you.
Sweet. And you say you don't write well, and that's why you come on, you express yourself so beautifully. Thank you so much for this warm conversation. Let me just ask around if there are a few questions. Yes, please.
Hi Ujwal, my name is Sahil. Thank you so much for your insights. I really love the idea of how you came and you started writing the book. The question I have for you today is that, according to me, I feel like the business environment and the startup ecosystem is constantly changing and evolving rapidly. In that case, would you write the book any differently? Huh. In that, if you had a chance to write it differently, would you change anything of it?
Not really, not really. So the book actually came out 6 months itself.
Okay.
So while the space is changing a lot, but the underlying thesis remains the same. The thesis around how do you think of ideas, right? The thesis around how do you raise money or how do you build or how you launch, right? So as I said, it's more of a framework. It's not a preachy or a prescriptive book. It will never tell you that these are the 10 things which you have to do. It will always push you to contemplate how you should think of those.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Hi, Ujwal. Thank you for sharing your on-ground experiences. It really brings to the fore a lot of what we actually want to hear about, right? Now, I have a few questions for you. So, you mentioned that there's a lot of gyan available online, and when we go to self-help books or non-fiction books, again, I like to think of it as gyan. So, I want to understand what value add does your book particularly brings to us. I mean, I would love to read it, but if you can tell me that. Another, you spoke about tangible experiences, tangible learnings. I would also like to know a little bit better about what particular tangible learning stuck with you, or what is your favorite part of it, if you can share that. And one last question is, you said when you started out, there weren't many startups, right? So is it like you got like an early mover advantage? Just asking. And if not, see, today I know that every next individual either wants to do a startup or is already involved in it. So I think there's a clutter. So how do we pave our way through it? Is there like a particular case study that you go back to or you really like that you would like to share?
Sure. Lot of questions. Um, the first question was on. Sorry, can you repeat the first question?
How is your book different from the online
So
camp?
actually, let me combine the first and the second question, which was on the tangible learning, and then on this part. So basically, the way the book is structured is that it has tangible learnings, which is the framework, and I'll talk about that, and then a story of a founder on how they did what they did, right? So for instance, tangible learning for me when I was raising money, there are four parts to how an investor looks at you, right? The first is the team, second is the market, third is the idea, and fourth is the business model. Basically, how you're making money out of it, right? Even within the team, it's about the credentials of the founders, how they're gelling well, and how well are they in storytelling, right? That's a framework. That's a tangible learning which I got out of the book. Now, what I was told by Anand Daniel, who is a partner at Axel, is how they invested in Freshworks. Right? So, for instance, the story which comes along is Freshworks story, which is the background of Girish. Right? He earlier worked at Zoho, the insights which he brought about, and how Zendesk was there as a competitor, right? And Zendesk wasn't doing a good job. So this covers the market as well as the team aspect. Then third, what the idea was, how they will be comparing and competing against Zendesk, and fourthly, how they'll be making money out of it. And today, Freshworks is a listed company in Nasdaq, and this conversation happened in 2016 when Freshworks was still not such a big company. So that's how the book is there, which is there's a framework, there are stories on how people did that, so that you actually get real learning, and it makes meaty for you. So that actually it's there. It's not a 10 step, it's not a gyan. It's on how those people did what they did. On my journey, I started my first startup in 2012, when there weren't many. Look, so there will never be a first mover's advantage. In fact, very interestingly, in a book called Zero to One, it's by Peter Thiel. He talks about last mover's advantage, right? And while it's also not exactly true. But in B2C world, whoever is the last mover has the advantage because it's a winner's take all market out there, right? In B2B, that's not the case. So there are certain nuances. I'm not a first mover. In fact, I started my recent company in 2000. In fact, full time last year itself, and now there are hundreds and thousands of startups which are being built. Right. The only thing is that what we did, and the reason we were able to raise such a large round, was because I started investing time on the ground since March 2020. So almost 3 years I've been on the ground. In fact, I remember the first conversation I had with the MD of Matrix Partners. So I'm not trying to boast. I'm just trying to make things real for you. he was talking about the founder of Off Business. Ashish Mohapatra is the founder of Off Business. Off Business is currently valued, I think, at $5 or $6 billion. In fact, Ashish worked at Matrix prior to starting Offbeat, and he said that your level of understanding, the depth where you're at, is much beyond what even Ashmo was at that level. The point I'm making is that many a times we feel that we have an idea, let's just directly jump onto it. While that's absolutely critically required, because unless you do it, you won't even know what it's worth. But what's more required is really understanding the customers. And it took us years to do that.
Thank you.